Hi, my name is Neha Sami, and one of the faculty at IIHS. Apologies, there'll be a little bit of disturbances in and around because, like everyone else, we're in lockdown and I'm doing this from home instead of from campus. So just bear with us in case there's a lag or if there's sort of disturbances. But I'll be here for about an hour, so happy to chat longer also if needed. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been with IHS for about 8 years now. I teach around questions of governance and around particularly around questions of large infrastructure and on environmental governance issues. If you do make it to the UFP, I'll be teaching a module with a few of my colleagues on urban governance issues. In addition to the research that I do on questions of urban and regional governance, I also help anchor the IHS research program along with a small team. And so, we kind of are building out IHS's research portfolio, and all those sort of research projects and things that you see are kind of managed by our small team. Um, so what I'm going to talk to you guys about today with respect to the UFP particularly is actually the admissions process and talk a little bit about sort of what the form entails, what the process itself entails, and sort of what are the different steps that you need to go through to make it to the UFP. I'm not sure if all of you have had the chance to look at our website or at the application form. If you haven't, please do register and start looking at the form because it's not a complicated form, but it does require some thinking on your part. So the sooner you get started, the better. Um, so the form, the UFP admissions take place in two steps. The first is kind of the written application, which is what you register for on the website. It's a form that requires you to fill in a whole range of personal details, just your educational qualifications, etc. And the sort of core part of the form are two questions that you have to fill. Through these questions, but actually trying to assess your motivation for joining the UFP, for applying to the program. And the other is to kind of test your analytical ability. So it's a set of problem statements, and we require you to pick one of a list and kind of respond analytically to a problem, or alternatively reflect on a problem that you might have faced as part of your professional work experience that allows us to understand and gauge your analytical skills. Remember that there's no kind of right or wrong answers. We're merely looking to understand both your motivation for joining the program and also to understand sort of where you come to the urban from, what your sort of backgrounds are, the way you approach kind of the analysis of urban problems. The form is in English, mainly because the program is taught largely in English. But we encourage you to fill it in any language that you feel comfortable writing in. Feel free to use diagrams, feel free to use sketches. If you feel you'd prefer actually writing it by hand and posting it to us, that's an option that's available as well. Um, so once we anticipate closing the admissions at this point around the 19th of April, but of course, given the lockdown and everything, should we need to extend it, and if people are facing challenges, we might end up, kind of taking things into consideration, extended by a few days. Although that's not kind of certain right now, so I would really encourage all of you to get it in by the current deadline, which is the 19th of April. Um, Once the forms come in and there's an evaluation, there's sort of a first round, which is the evaluation that takes place of the written form. Following that, you'll be shortlisted for the second round, which is a set of interviews, and these take place online via Skype. So you don't have to come in physically for that. We'll be doing them online sometime towards the middle to end of May. You will get a notification if you've been selected for the interview round. They're usually short, about 15 to 20-minute interviews that are held with a panel of 2 to 3 faculty members at IIHS. Again, this is to sort of understand your fit with the program, your motivations for joining the program. Um, Following the interview process in early June, you will be given kind of intimation of whether you've made it through into the UFP or not. Um, we also offer the UFP is a needs blind program, which means that your financial ability has no impact on whether you make it through or not. We provide extensive financial support for everybody who needs it, and who needs to kind of sort of draw on that to be part of the program. There are also a small number of living stipends and sort of other kinds of financial support available. So, and you will be given kind of a form. If you make it through to the UFP, you'll be given a form to sort of request a consideration for financial aid, should you want it. That's kind of the admissions and scholarship process in a very quick summary. I'm happy to answer questions that any of you might have at this point, because it's probably better that sort of, I use this time to address any kinds of doubts that you might have about the application process or the program itself more broadly. Feel free to ask. No questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I can talk a little bit more about the process itself. Um, okay, someone wants to know what an average day at campus is like. It's usually, I mean, it depends on the term that we're going through, the modules. So the first sort of, I guess the first term in some senses, if you want to think of it as that, is largely taught. It focuses a lot on actually getting everybody, because the class is a very interdisciplinary class. It focuses on getting everyone onto the same page, building a shared kind of urban vocabulary. So about in the first kind of 3 months or so of the UFP, about 60% of your time will be spent in the classroom on campus in Bangalore at the IIHS campus. Um, there we slowly gradually start building out more and more field-based components as you advance through the program. So each module that you go through will have kind of a field component to it. There will also be the there's an integrated case that runs you through um, the kind of field-based work. There's also practical, which is kind of an immersion in the city itself. Following that, you'll end up, the sort of in-class time decreases, and the time in the field with sort of projects, with live projects, with partners in the field will increase as you kind of build your capacity to work more and more in the urban towards the elective term and then on into your internship. So the idea is to build you over the 10 months to get you to a point where you're ready to go out and be an independent urban professional by the time you get to your internships in sort of months 9 or 10. The admission form does have option to save different stages of applications. You can edit it when you go back to it. The save option is merely to enable you to not have to re-enter everything all the time. So you do have the option to go back to it and edit and change. Again, I would strongly recommend, particularly given the way things are right now, get to it soon. Don't, especially because all of us are relying on sort of internet at home and things like that. Fill it in sooner rather than later. Don't kind of rely on doing things at the last minute. So the sooner you get to it, the better it is. And if you do have questions while you're filling the form, if you have any doubts, please do reach out to us. We're always around. We're happy to help with anything that you might have. Um, someone's asked a question about the analytical questions in the application. Will we be judging the answers on nuances present? This is it. It doesn't. The question is also about someone who's new to the urban. You don't have to have any prior knowledge for the urban to answer these questions. We take into account the person who's filling the form, your background, draw on your strengths. It's okay if you don't come from an urban background, draw on your strengths, on your knowledge, skills, and on your kind of professional voluntary experiences that you might have had to answer those questions. What we're looking to do is to understand your motivation for joining the program, and sort of understand where you come from in terms of wanting to work on the urban. Someone wants to know the assessment criteria in the application. Like I said, we actually don't judge people on the basis of their grades or their marks. We look really for your interest, your motivation, and sort of your enthusiasm for working in and around cities and questions of the urban, and also why particularly the Urban Fellows program. So think carefully about why you want to come here. This is not a program that builds specialists, where it's more to prepare you to work on the urban more broadly. If you're interested in particular aspects of sort of engineering or economics or specific ideas about social sciences, then we're not this is not the place for that kind of specific discipline based work. It's interdisciplinary. So if you want to build out work within a particular discipline, this is not the program. But we're looking for people who want to work on interdisciplinary issues, who want to problem solve around urban questions. And we're really looking for people who are really, really strongly motivated and enthusiastic about working on sort of urban problems, particularly in Indian cities. Someone wants to know, sort of examples of projects that Urban Fellows have undertaken. It's a very, very wide range of things. People draw on a whole range of things that they've learned in the UFP, on their backgrounds before, and think through a whole range of different types of things when they approach their projects. The projects are usually offered as part of live things that are going on at IIHS, and they're usually a combination of fellows' interests and what the demands and the needs of the projects are. So people this year have worked on things like housing, affordable housing, public health, the public school system, on podcasts, on film, on courses for housing activists, on creating educational components, on working on questions about land and financialization of land. So it's a very, very wide range of things. There's also the option, which is not kind of very widely offered, but there are a couple of fellows do also undertake a very specific sort of independent research project that they come up with an idea for, and then approach faculty mentors to guide them through that. So we do often have between 2 and 3 each year who opt for an independent research project as well. Other questions? So again, I just want to reiterate that you don't have to have an urban background at all to be part of this, to apply to the UFP. This is not for people only who come from an urban planning or architecture or urban design background. It's a very interdisciplinary class. We've had a very wide-ranging set of disciplines in the class, from lawyers to medical practitioners and doctors to filmmakers, artists, economists, sociologists, of course, urban planners and architects, journalists. So it's a very, very wide range of people. So don't let the fact that you don't have any urban experience stop you from applying. But know that this is an interdisciplinary program. We draw a lot on peer-to-peer learning. So if you hear or talk to any of our alumni, they will tell you that one of the strongest things that held them together as a class was actually the interdisciplinarity of the class group itself. So you end up learning a lot from your peers in the classroom, and from their kind of the shared experience that you have as a group. So the fact that you don't have any urban experience stop you from applying. Someone has a very specific question about the education column, about having completed their schooling from 2 different institutes. The CGPA is they want to know if they can fill in the CGPA on a scale of 4. That's fine. Just please in the comments specify the basis of the grade, and that should be fine. You don't have to convert them to another format. Other than samples of work, can we attach additional links like social media where you might have illustrated your interest? Yes, you can, but these will not be sort of in lieu of the sample of work. We will still need the sample of work from you. You're free to attach other links where you might have illustrated your interest, but we will not assess them in place of your sample of work. So we will still need a sample of work from you. Someone wants to know if there's elements of spatial design explored in the class. In parts, there are definitely fellows who have explored spatial design as part of the practica, which is kind of a studio-based, sort of live, immersive course that runs through, it's a module that runs through your almost your first term, if you will, at the fellows program. There are also specific electives that allow you to explore spatial design. But there is no overall comprehensive focus on spatial design per se. Um, Someone else wants to know, they're an architect wanting to apply, but if there's a degree associated with the completion of the course, or another portfolio that should be prepared for the internship. So this is a little bit different from normal architecture school. There isn't a degree associated with the completion. There is a certificate, and there isn't, depending on what you want to do. The internship is on the basis of the work that you've done at the fellowship. You don't actually have to prepare a separate portfolio. However, if you do want to kind of work on very specific types of questions, or you do want to work with a very specific firm, or a set of people or a network, and you do have previous experience that allows you to demonstrate sort of set of skills, you're more than welcome to use that. You don't have to, though. You don't have to prepare. The assumption is that the UFE will prepare you for the internship that you want to do. And a lot of our fellows have actually often come from, say, an architecture background, but ended up doing internships in completely different fields. So it really depends on how your interests evolve over the time of the program. There's someone who's asking about working with vulnerable groups in an urban setting, and how the UFP helps sensitize people to working with such groups. We do that through multiple ways. There's an ethics training, a research ethics training course that everyone undergoes at IIHS, which kind of sort of exposes you to the different kinds of challenges that you might face in terms of the ethics of dealing with these kinds of communities. There is always faculty support and mentoring when you first go into the field. So there are a certain set of protocols that are laid out. There are communities that we have worked with and have relationships with, to whom you're introduced through certain community leaders. So you're not sent out cold into those communities. There's also the process of the integrative case that runs through the first kind of commons modules that you will go through in the UFP, that is completely faculty guided and led, that sort of eases you into working into the field, eases you with working with local communities. So there are a whole range of ways in which we sort of work with, we ourselves work with vulnerable communities, and we take our responsibility with working these communities very, very seriously. So we don't kind of introduce our class to them unless we have full confidence in the fact that either we or the class or the sort of fellows involved will actually be able to be sensitive to these groups. There's a question about video or audio material which is enough for the application, or so if your video or audio material as a sort of application for sample of work, if your video or audio material is work that you have done and curated and created, then absolutely it's enough. We have had people who've uploaded, they're filmmakers who've uploaded their films. There are artists, graphic designers, fine art designers who've actually submitted their portfolios as kind of visual material. We haven't had audio material submitted only as part of it. We've had submitted as supplementary things. People have actually even submitted film scripts as part of work that they've done. So it's a very broad thing. What I ask in the sample of work is that submit one, don't submit multiple. Submit something that shows your strengths. You're free to choose whatever you want, preferably something that you've done on your own and not as part of a group, that allows us to assess your kind of ability as an individual researcher, filmmaker, scholar, whatever it is, or a practitioner. Um, so the sample of work doesn't have to be a written sample of work. It can take any format, but it does have to be something that reflects your work. And I would ask that you submit something that's substantial enough that allows us to assess that. Please don't submit very kind of brief samples of work that doesn't give us enough to gauge your kind of skills on. There's a question about guidance towards the end of the program to help fellows pick a specialization or work or further studies. Yes, absolutely, not only towards the end of the program, but all the way through. There's guidance, not just in the end of the program, but all the way through, not just to pick your kind of job, but also to your electives, to tailor the entire program to take you to wherever you want to go by the end of the UFP. There's a question about working in the travel industry, someone who's working in the travel industry and wants to apply, and question about what kind of samples of work they should present. I think since you're talking about sort of sustainability, if there's kind of work that you've done around producing the kind of sustainable travel products that you're talking about, or travel experiences that you're talking about, if you could send us something that reflects the work that you've done around these questions, proposals that you have created, or sort of projects that you've worked on, and or that you have contributed to, clearly outlining what your contribution has been to these projects, that I think would be very helpful. Um, there's a question about more fieldwork than a classroom teaching discussion. So like I said earlier, I'm not sure if you were there when I was responding to an earlier question about this also. The fieldwork in the UFP is graduated. So you start with more classroom time and a little less fieldwork time. It's sort of a 60-40, 70-30 split. And as you go through the program, that ratio increases and you end up spending more and more time in the field. So the initial kind of couple of months are sort of classroom heavy, but each component, even each classroom session will have a sort of field-based component attached to it. There will definitely be the practica where 2 days in the week you're in the field, but the component that you spend of time that you spend in the field will increase as you go through the program. There's also the skill labs that take you out into the city. So there is a lot of field-based work. There's a lot of experiential learning. Um, so it's a blend of the two. We emphasize classroom teaching in the initial phases of the program, mainly because people come from very different disciplinary backgrounds. The IIHS way of teaching is very different. Our curriculum is very different from things that most people have experienced in the past. And so we use the initial couple of months to get everyone on the same page, to build a shared urban vocabulary, and then sort of ease ourselves into the field over time. There's a question about scholarships and who gets it. Like I said earlier, the scholarship, the Urban Fellows program is needs blind, which means that your financial ability should not impact your ability to participate in the program or apply to the program. The decision on scholarships is made on on a range of criteria. So there is a form that you will have to fill in if you're chosen to apply to chosen into the program, that you can fill in and sort of send in a request to be considered for financial aid. And so there is no, I mean, we have the ability to offer funding to as many people as needed, but it's based on financial need and not sort of any other sort of sets of criteria. So we have supported about 15 to 20% of the class in various ways over the last 4 years of the UFP. So there isn't a number, there's no few, it's not a set of chosen people. It's just that we ask for, there's a separate application process that you go through that, and that it's evaluated by a committee at IIHS that sort of decides on how fellowships are administered. Other questions? So again, I would really encourage you to listen to the testimonials that our fellows have put up about from sort of the last 4 years, that about their experiences with the fellowship program, about kind of the impact that the diversity in the class has had, the kinds of support that IIHS has offered. So it's it's a very kind of supportive learning environment. I would not hesitate to kind of reach out to people if you have questions even during the application process. There's a question about what proof is needed for financial need. There are a range of things. Income certificates are one, but all of these will be shared with you when you have to, with that separate form that you have to fill in to request to be considered for financial aid. So don't worry, it's not an onerous process. It's quite straightforward, and we usually ask you for a short essay explaining why you should be considered for financial aid, and the proof comes later once you've been kind of allocated or selected for aid. So we will ask you for proof much later in the stage once you've been admitted to the program. And when you're being considered for financial aid, you don't have to submit it upfront with your application form. That's only after you've been selected into the program. So don't worry about it right now. Just focus on getting your application in. There's a question about the ratio of group work to individual project work. There's actually very little individual project work. Almost all the work that happens at the UFP, if it's project related, is typically in groups. There are individual class assignments that different modules ask you to undertake. So there will be, but again, the ratio of group work to project work is about 60-40, 70-30, in that range. Partly because what we're trying to do is to build the ability of people to work collaboratively. The UFP is not a competitive program at all. We focus and emphasize collaboration. We focus on building kind of leaders who are able to draw on each other's strengths. And so to that end, a lot of our work and a lot of the assignments that you will do are designed to work and build those skills of collaboration across different sets of people, across different disciplinary groups, and across different kinds of interests that people come from. There's a question about software for the course. No, there is no need for you to be well versed with any particular software at all. Whatever you need for the course, you'll be taught at the UFP, so you don't have to come in with any specific sets of needs or skills other than a very strong motivation to work on cities. Any other questions or comments? If you haven't, please register. Please start the application process early. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every year, towards kind of the last hour or so of the application deadline, we end up getting a lot of emails and a lot of requests for extensions from people, and people end up missing the deadline. Please don't be in that state. Please apply soon. We're all in lockdown right now, so we have lots of time. So get started sooner rather than later. Any other? There's a question on resources available to expand personal horizons. I'm not sure I understand that. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what exactly you're looking for? Someone who's asked a question about the kinds of resources available for fellows to expand their personal horizons. If you could elaborate. So in terms of the IIHS library, they want to know in terms of books, guest lecturers, etc. The IIHS library is one of the better kind of urban libraries in the country. We have access to a wide range of journals, but also not just academic books, but also a whole range of non-academic books around cities. There's a whole range of audiovisual material as well. There's a lot of historical material as well in our library, and we also through the year have a range of master classes that are particularly for the fellows, where we bring in a whole range of industry experts, academics from outside of IIHS through our networks to come and speak to fellows and spend about a day, half a day to a day with them, just interacting and sort of, for fellows to learn from their experiences. There's also a whole range of, work and sort of events that go on at IIHS separately. The IIHS Publics, the film screenings, the writing festival, City Scripts. There's a film festival that happens every year. There's also the kind of our annual urban policy dialogues, our annual research week with the research conference. So there's a whole range of activities that go on at IIHS that you're more than welcome to participate in, both as a volunteer, but also as something you just want to come and attend and listen to and watch. So there's lots and lots of different ways in which you can kind of grow beyond the fellowship itself. Someone who wants to know if letters of recommendation are required for the application. No, you do not need letters of recommendation for the application. There's a question about my work and the courses that I offer. So the work, like, as I mentioned earlier, I work on questions of urban and regional governance. I look mostly at questions of large infrastructure and on sort of the politics of environmental governance. I usually teach a course on urban governance in the Commons module. I have in years past led exposure visits, which is kind of the other kind of field-based component actually for someone who was asking about field stuff. We do run an exposure visit towards the end of your first Commons term, where you're taken to two cities. In the past, we've usually go to Mumbai and Chennai. So I've led the exposure visit in the past to Mumbai. And I've from time to time taught classes on proposal writing, on research methods as well. What are the kinds of usual classes like? Are they conducted every day? Yes. So classes usually run Monday to Wednesday on most times. Thursdays and Fridays are typically for either project work or practical work, so that's usually your time in the field. The classes usually run from about 10:30 in the morning to about 3:34. It could be shorter or longer depending on sort of a skill lab, whether you have an elective. Some courses are run in workshop mode, and so it'll depend. It varies from term to term and module to module. But typically Monday through Wednesday you're in class, Thursdays and Fridays you're in the field, broadly. There's a question about whether fellows get to volunteer participate in events held at IIHS during the course. Absolutely. Not only do you get to, you're encouraged to participate in events held at IIHS. I mean, the point of being at IIHS is to be able to draw on the wide range and breadth of things that happen at IIHS and the work that we do. So fellows have done everything from volunteering, behind the scenes to actually even presenting at, say, for example, our annual research conference. And some of our fellows still come back to some of these events and participate in these events even after having graduated. So absolutely, we encourage fellows to participate as much as they can in everything that goes on campus. There's a question from someone who's an architect and wants to work on international aid and development into projects that are undertaken by multilateral agencies like the World Bank or UN Habitat. Are there opportunities that might arise at IIHS that may lead to pathways like these post the fellowship? I'm not sure if you're asking if you can be employed at IIHS post the fellowship. If that's the case, then no, you can't for at least a couple of years after you've graduated. We don't actually hire back our own fellows immediately. there's a lot of work that happens at IHS, where we work with a whole range of agencies in the UN system. We have done and continue to work even now with the World Bank, with a whole range of other multilateral agencies like ILO, the World Health Organization, etc. There is absolutely the possibility that your internship or your live project could be on one or the other of these projects, depending on what's going on when you're in the program. We're happy to we have had sort of fellows who worked on these projects before. Like this year, we had people who worked on a project that's kind of being funded by the World Health Organization, for example. Um, and we're happy to help you and support you to pursue these kinds of opportunities post the fellowship if that's really what you're interested in doing. And we're happy to kind of find ways of making that happen for you. But I mean, during the fellowship, you will have the opportunity of talking to and working with people who worked with these agencies, institutions before and currently as well. Other questions? Comments? There's a question about accommodation, whether it's provided at the Sadashivnagar campus, and about when our Kengeri campus will open. So accommodation is not provided on campus at Sadashivnagar. All classes are held at our Bangalore City campus, which is in Sadashivnagar in Bangalore. Accommodation is provided very close to campus. And the Kengeri campus, we hope will open in about a year to a year and a half. So we're not sure. We would ideally, I mean, we would love to be able to teach on campus sooner rather than later. But at this point, it looks like it'll be a couple of years before we can start teaching on Kingeri campus. Other questions? With that, I can talk a little bit more about myself. Someone had asked about the work that I do and the courses I offer. And I think this is also by way of saying that I myself come from a very interdisciplinary background. I have an undergraduate degree in economics, a degree in environmental studies, and then my PhD is in urban planning. So I come from very, very different kind of disciplinary backgrounds, which is the case for most of us at IHS. We all come from at least 2 or 3 different disciplinary backgrounds. And I think that's really the strength of what we do, is that in the work that we do, we approach it some kind of problem first, and build out our work from there. And so draw on the different kinds of disciplinary trajectories that we have had in our training and in the work that we've done to reflect on the work that we do. And so, which is why you'll see that I talk about the course that I teach as a course on urban governance, rather than it being a course on sort of a more sectoral or a disciplinary led course. So I don't teach a course on public policy. I teach a course on urban and regional governance. There's someone who's asked about an age bar to apply for the course. Yes, there is. You have to be under the age of 30 to apply for the course. Is it mandatory to stay in accommodation provided by IHS? Is it part of the fellowship? It is not absolutely mandatory. However, we do really encourage everybody to stay on campus. It is part of the fellowship. It is part of your fees. But we encourage everyone to stay on campus on accommodation that we provide, partly because a lot of the learning and a lot of the work and a lot of the kind of intangible kind of growth that happens does take place off campus in housing after hours. And so a lot of the kind of bonding, a lot of the relationships people build do happen, when people share have requested that they be exempted from staying on campus accommodation, and we do review these cases on a case by case basis. But as far as possible, we like to encourage everyone to stay on campus. Um, Hello, can you guys still hear me? I'll repeat the bit about the campus accommodation. It is not mandatory, like I said, to stay on accommodation provided by IIHS. It is part of the fellowship. It is part of your fees. But I would strongly encourage you to stay on campus, because the kind of bonding that takes place is very important and integral to the fellowship experience. A lot of the intangible growth and learning um, takes place when people share spaces together. We have, on a case by case basis, made exception for people who are, for example, caregivers to family. But as far as possible, we encourage people to stay on campus. There's a question about post the fellowship, if there are opportunities for fellows to pursue research within IIHS, maybe in the form of PhD between IIHS and another institution. So like I said earlier, we don't hire our own fellows, so you would not be able to work directly with IIHS. We have had examples of people who worked with some of our partners and had kind of indirect associations with IIHS post the fellowship. If it's about a PhD between IIHS and another partnering institution, it would depend on the requirements of that institution, and whether they're open to someone from IIHS being on the doctoral committee of somebody there, or whether they have any specific requirements. So the option is, of course, available. We don't, like I said, hire our own fellows, not at least for about 2 to 3 years, until they've gone out, done other things, worked with other people in other places. But we encourage our fellows to keep in touch uh, with us, and we've often had times when they've come back as collaborators through other institutions that they work with. Other questions? Any difficulties with the form in particular? If you have any particular questions about the application form itself. There's a question about difficulties in dealing with government agencies, and what I would suggest as someone who works on governance, and what percentage of work opportunities are not strictly based with the government agencies, such as planning departments or other government agencies. Um, I won't kind of deny that it is challenging to work with government agencies, but I think that a lot of it is actually misunderstandings about the kinds of constraints that government agencies themselves face. And so it's not that they don't that people who work. I mean, also remember that these agencies are not kind of monolith, faceless entities, but there are people who inhabit them, people who work with them, and these are very smart people. And they come with a whole breadth of experience that a lot of us turn to, draw on as part of our work as well. And we often teach with them. They will be in your classrooms, they will be teaching you. I think the more you interact with government officers, you realize that they're also facing a whole range of challenges and constraints. And I think that part of the challenge of the UFP is to equip us as practitioners, whether we're in the government system or not, to be able to work with the challenges that they face in government. So it is difficult. Government agencies do come with a set of constraints that are, especially if you're working with local government agencies. So ULBs, for example, urban local bodies, city agencies are very constrained by the powers that they have. And so even if they want to do something, the frameworks within which they work don't often enable it. And I think it's useful for us to work with them, to build out and to see how within the constraints that exist, what we can do with them. There are a whole range of work opportunities that are not based strictly with the government agency, but if you do want to have policy impact, you will at some point, sooner rather than later, need to engage with them. And it's always best, and this is part of what we do at the UFP, is to think of them as collaborators, as colleagues, and to find ways in which we can collectively achieve common goals, rather than looking at them as antagonists or people who are just out to kind of obstruct development in one way or the other. the more you spend, the more time you spend at IIHS, the more you interact with people from different government agencies, you will begin to realize that these are people who are very well aware of the challenges that they face, that they impose, and are actually looking to us for ways and support in which they can overcome them. So think about it in that way rather than think of it as something that's a challenge and a difficulty and that can't be overcome. Um, there's a question about whether the course focuses more on research work or a practical approach to certain issues, or both. The course focuses on building urban practitioners. As far as we look at urban practitioners, for us, research is a form of urban practice. It is uh, all of the work that we do has, whether it's research or practice, as as a lot of people think of it, is grounded in an urban reality, in an urban problem. And so all of it, goes towards some sort of problem solving, policy related kind of work. A lot of the work is the UFP is about building a set of conceptual and sort of conceptual skills, tools to give you tools as fellows to be able to go out and do whatever kind of urban practice you want to do. So there is an emphasis on building conceptual learning. There is an emphasis on building your ability to think across disciplines, because like I said, we're not building specialists, we're building people who can think and work across disciplines through the fellows program. um, but there is a very, very strong emphasis on experiential learning, on field-based learning, and so you will be able to, the idea is for you to be able to connect what you're seeing in class with what you see on the field. There's a question about partner institutions that IIHS works with and projects that we've conducted in the past. So we work with, there's a complete list of our partners, both present and past, on our website. But we work with a whole range of domestic and international academic institutions. We work with government agencies. We work with the department, the state of Karnataka. We work with the state of Tamil Nadu. We work with the national government. We're empaneled with a whole range of ministries at the national level. We also work with the IPCC, with a whole range of agencies in the UN system. So it's a very, very wide, there's a whole range of nonprofits. So work with SEVA, with Viego, with Hyderabad Urban Labs, with CPR, with the IITs, with the University of Oxford, with Cambridge, with Yale, University of Cape Town, like I said, the WHO, ILO, etc. And there's a whole range of projects that we've done in the past. So some work that we're doing, that we've done before and continue to do, is on water and sanitation. We're providing policy support to the government of Tamil Nadu on water and sanitation. We've done work on groundwater in the past. We do a lot of work on affordable housing. There's a lot of work that's going on between the link between informal labor and employment and health outcomes, particularly for women. We're looking at large infrastructure and the kind of politics and governance around those questions. We do a lot of work around climate change and sort of impacts of climate change, such as sort of climate-induced migration, for example, or the impact that it has on rural communities. We've done a lot of work on disaster recovery, and on people who face challenges, especially marginalized communities, around kind of the link between disasters and housing, for example. There's a lot of work that goes around on questions of land, both on the administrative side of things, but also on the financial and the kind of planning side of things. We do a very wide range. A full list of the projects that we've done, both in the present, that are ongoing right now, but also that we've done in the past, is up on our website. Other questions? So we've got about 5 or 10 minutes on the webinar. There's a question about whether the course is suitable for married uh, applicants, or for women. Can they work as efficiently as others? Um, I mean, about 60% of our class is women, and I'm actually not sure why you would assume that women or married applicants can't work as efficiently as others. But we do provide support to people who need it. We have absolutely had people from all ranges of backgrounds and all people who faced a whole range of personal challenges, and we've helped them and worked with them on a case by case basis to overcome it. It is a full-time 9-month program, so what we do tell people is they can't hold other jobs. So you can't be working and be at the fellowship program. It's a full-time commitment if you do come to us, but we do find ways in which we can support you to spend kind of as much time as you can with us. There's a question about whether the fellows can expect any sort of interaction with some of the universities that I mentioned during the Urban Fellows program. If and they want elaboration on that. Yes, we've often had the last 2 years. We've actually had project meetings where a lot of our partners from Europe, Africa, and Asia have been on campus through the course of the year. Uh, they've been part of our research conferences, so there has been ample opportunity to interact with them. If your project ends up being on one of the projects that we are collaborating with these universities on, there's absolutely every chance that you'll get to interact with them. Should they be visiting, they often come and give master classes. But again, because a lot of these are international, it depends on their availability and whether they're visiting India at the time. There's definitely a lot of opportunity to interact with folks based out of domestic institutions. And of course, with our international partners as they come through, we've also often done Skype masterclasses with several of our partners. So the opportunity to interact with people across the IIHS network is actually immense. Um, there's a question about whether there are finals. Um, I assume you mean final examinations, and no, there aren't. There isn't like a final examination like you think of it in terms of a school year. Each course will have an assignment that you will have to do. Some of those will be group assignments, some of those will be individual assignments. Things like the practica and your projects will have a final presentation that you will do as part of a larger group. But there's no kind of board exam or final exam for the UFP as a whole. Um, Last questions. We have about 5 more minutes, 5, 10 more minutes. Last call. Well, if there are no further questions, then we'll start closing this out. Like I said earlier, please, apply if you are considering um, apply soon, apply and take your time over it. Like I said, it is not a difficult form, but it does need you to sort of think a little bit. Um, so the and don't kind of wait until the last sort of deadline to apply. Um, there are upcoming webinars which we'll send out more details about the time and date, etc. But the the next one is on the UFP curriculum. There are also a string of webinars that are upcoming with our alumni, which are always really interesting and fun, because I mean, you'll be able to hear from them firsthand what their experiences was. So do sign up for those. Um, there's a question about whether a sample of work will do or video or audio material is a must. You can decide what your sample of work is going to be. I mean, if you want to submit a written sample of work, fine. If you want to submit, a sample of work that's in sort of an audio visual format, that's fine as well. Submit something that showcases your strength and your talent best. We're looking for something that kind of demonstrates to us the work that you have done and are capable of doing. We allow video, audio, visual material to be submitted because we have applicants who are designers, who come from sort of graphic arts backgrounds, often filmmakers, people who actually come often from backgrounds that they can communicate their work better through portfolios or sketches or various other audio visual formats. So it's a very flexible format. Use that flexibility well, and submit whatever is the best, that showcases your sort of interest the best. There's a question about the range of countries, regions covered by the teaching in the UFP. So the UFP is a program that's focused largely um, on India. We focus on Indian cities. It draws on the work that we do in the Indian context, but it is rooted in the context of urban problems in the global south more broadly. So a lot of the work that we do is comparative work with other parts of Asia and Africa, and so you will hear a lot of that being brought in. There's a lot of comparative research that we do. A lot of our partners are located in these regions. So the breadth is on that. That said, we do expect most people to be working in the Indian context, and so as urban practitioners, we do try and provide a certain level of familiarity with challenges that people face in Indian cities, both big and small. But that doesn't mean that this is not kind of relevant to contexts outside of India as well. I think we're pretty much out of time. If there's any last questions, I'll take them now. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. Um, if there's nothing else, we can close shortly. All right, if there are no further questions, then we'll close. Thank you all for coming. Please do reach out to us if you have any further questions. Look out for our other webinars starting sort of next week, Mondays and Thursdays. There'll be one or two with our alumni coming up perhaps in between as well. So keep a lookout for those. And like I said, I've said before, register soon, apply soon, and reach out to us if you have any trouble with the form. Thank you and good luck.